Chapter 7. All during the night, Peg's sleep was fitful. She crept downstairs the next morning, while it was still dark, lit the oil lamps, and started a fire in the stove. By the time Ma came down and began cooking breakfast, Peg had set the table, filled the tea kettle, and melted a little pork fat in a skillet ready to fry flapjacks. I made the batter, Peg said proudly. Ma measured tea into a pot and poured it into the boiling water. You're my morning sleepyhead. What pulled you out of bed so early? She put the pot in the center of the table, paused, as though she suddenly remembered something, and smiled teasingly. Does your early rising have anything to do with Miss Hennessy's visit? I couldn't sleep, Ma, Peg mumbled. She gave an extra stir of the batter and dropped spoonfuls onto the sizzling pan. She surely won't be coming this early. I know. Ma put a hand on Peg's shoulders and turned her so that Peg was looking into her eyes. What else do you know, love? Nothing really, Ma, just guesses, Peg answered honestly. Ma picked up a broad spatula and reached across Peg to flip the flapjacks. You said Miss Hennessy's sister lives nearby. Exactly where is nearby? With an effort, Peg kept herself from groaning aloud. Could Ma read minds? Unable to meet her gaze, Peg shrugged and said, when Miss Hennessy gets here, you can ask her. Ma set a heaping plate of flapjacks at the table. Sit down and eat, love. She nodded toward the stairs, which creaked under John's heavy footsteps. I'll make the next batch for John. John didn't like to talk before breakfast, and Ma said nothing more about Miss Hennessy, to Peg's relief. After John had left for the blacksmith shop, Ma pinned up her sleeves and laid a fire on the cement block in the backyard. She placed the large, heavy boiler pan on the support over the fire, and she and Peg carried buckets of water to half fill the boiler. Ma poured lumps of soft lye soap into the water, stirred the mixture of a long, thick stick until the soap was melted. Peg helped carry out arms full of soiled clothing, sheets, and towels, some of which were dropped into the simmering water, which Ma stirred endlessly back and forth. Peg, on the other hand, listened to the sound of the horses' hooves and buggy wheels. Where was Miss Hennessy? It was already close to 8 o'clock. Why hadn't she come? Peg jumped as a voice spoke from the open kitchen door. Noreen, Peg! No one answered my knock, so I just walked in. Ma put down the stirring stick and smiled as she wiped her hands on her apron. You're always welcome in our house, Violet. You know that. Miss Hennessy sailed down the steps of the back porch to stoop in a trim brown traveling costume. My, aren't you looking grand? Ma said. Would you like a cup of tea? We could leave the wash for a while. As she glanced at the boiler and the pile of clothing on the ground, Miss Hennessy frowned. Oh dear, in my excitement I didn't stop to think. Excitement? Ma asked. My sister Nellie. Did Peg tell you? I've heard from Nellie and discovered she and my brother-in-law, Louis Parker, are now living on a farm right here in Buchanan County, south of St. Joseph. It's lovely for you, Ma said. You said south of St. Joseph? Yes, very near the Swenson's farm, where your son Danny lives. Miss Hennessy ducked her head, almost shy and apologetic, as if she'd been when she first came to St. Joseph. In my foolishness, I rented a horse and buggy. I was so sure that you and Peg would ride with me. It would give you an opportunity to visit with Danny. Ma held out an arm toward the washing. As you can see, I can't get away, Violet. Not today. Miss Hennessy took Ma's hand and squeezed it in her own. Of course, she said apologetically. I was so thoughtless not to have invited you ahead of time. Embarrassed, Ma began. Violet, you were not thoughtless. But Miss Hennessy interrupted, her eyes dark with misery as she pleaded. Oh, Noreen, will you please allow Peg to come with me, even though you can't? Peg gasped as she heard Miss Hennessy add, so maybe some women are brave enough to travel alone, but I'm not. Peg and I will be good company for each other. I assure you she'll be perfectly safe. I even have a letter of safe passage signed by the provost marshal himself in case we meet up with any patrols. Patrols, Ma repeated and frowned. I have no reason to fear the patrols. Miss Hennessy's eyes met Peg as she said, Peg is not afraid. Whatever qualms Peg felt about leaving Ma and traveling alone with Miss Hennessy vanished immediately. Ma, she said, the patrols are Union. They're on our side. Miss Hennessy gave a deep breath and spoke rapidly, not giving Ma a chance to object. It's the southern counties that have so much conflict between patrols and bushwhackers. During the last few months, there have been little trouble in Buchanan County. We'll be safe, I promise. I assure you, I couldn't make the trip myself if I thought otherwise. Twice Ma had opened her mouth to speak, but was unable to break into Miss Hennessy's plea. Now, however, she spoke up firmly. My mind wouldn't be easy if Peg were away from home. Ma, Peg wailed. I'm not afraid of patrols. The army's there to protect us, and if I go to Miss Hennessy, I can visit Danny. To Peg's surprise, Miss Hennessy let go of Ma's hand, pulled a handkerchief from a reticule, and dabbed at her eyes. You're right, Noreen, she said. You're right to feel that even though Peg would be under my constant, loving protection, I could never be able to take care of her the way you could. Ma's face turned pink, and she fumbled for words. That's not what I meant, Violet. It was foolish to hope. Violet murmured into her handkerchief. I haven't seen my sister for at least 5 years. All I've been able to think about would be Nellie and her dear smile and happy ways. I should have asked you first. I shouldn't have depleted my much-needed funds to rent the horse and buggy. She gave a loud sniffle. Oh dear, come inside and sit down, Mama. We'll have that cup of tea while you tell me about your sister. A rush of excitement warmed Peg's chest. Was Ma weakening? Peg filled the kettle and listened quietly as Miss Hennessy said, Nellie is 2 years younger than I am. She married just before our parents died, a good match with a fine man, Louis Parker, one of the Virginia Parkers. I thought you said your family lived in Boston. They did, but only very briefly. My grandmother on my father's side was becoming frail. My parents moved to Boston to care for her. And one day on the street, a runaway horse. Miss Hennessy broke down, sobbed into her handkerchief. Ma got up and brought her a dry one. She patted Miss Hennessy's shoulders and said, I'm so sorry I've brought up unhappy memories. Miss Hennessy wiped her eyes. It's all right, Noreen. I just hope you can understand how alone I feel, with Nellie and Louis so far away. You can imagine how thrilled I am when I discovered they're now close at hand. Perhaps they can visit you in St. Joseph, Ma said. Violet climbed to her feet, her shoulders drooping. Perhaps, she murmured. There was no hope in her voice. Ma stood too. She took a long look from Peg and turned to Violet. You'll have Peg home again before too late? Before dark, I promise. Peg sucked in her breath. Please, Ma, she whispered. If it weren't for the possibilities that patrols might stop you. Miss Hennessy pulled a folded piece of paper from her reticule and gave it to Ma. Here's the letter General John Bassett wrote for me. You can see it's official. No one will stop us. Besides, there's been very little action lately in Buchanan County. That's true, Ma admitted slowly, but please, Peg begged. With a sigh, Ma gave in. All right, Peg, put on your dress with the pleated skirt, and for goodness sakes, find a pair of stockings without a hole in them, and take a shawl. It's warm now, but the weather may change. And brush your hair, and Peg, her heart jumping with excitement, had never dressed so fast. She felt grown up and brave and independent, and the best part was that she would soon see Danny again. She accepted the sunbonnet Ma gave her, tied the bow to one side rather than under her chin, all the while pretending it was an elegant feathered hat. She had time for a quick hug for Ma before she climbed into the buggy and set off with Miss Hennessy on the journey. As they rode through town, Miss Hennessy chattered pleasantly about Miss Kling's excellent food and told Peg amusing stories about the other boarders. How long will you stay in St. Joseph? Peg asked. Well, that depends on the circumstances, Miss Hennessy answered. Mostly financial. Peg wasn't sure how much it would cost to stay at a boarding house, but Ma had mentioned the word expensive when she talked about Mrs. Kling's boarding house to Mr. Murphy. Why don't you stay with your sister and husband? She suggested. Miss Hennessy gave a flick of the reins, guiding the horse along the ruts in the road before she looked at Peg and smiled. Their visit in the area is only but temporary, she said. But so is yours, Peg thought. Oh well, she put the problem out of mind. Grown-ups had their own way of thinking about things, and sometimes it made it more complicated than they need be. Like when Ma had agreed to come to Missouri and marry Alfred Swenson, but instead fell in love with John Murphy, which left Mr. Swenson without a wife, so he married Annie Pratka, which then Danny chose to stay with the Swensons, and Peg chose to live with Ma. Oh, Danny, 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 Peg thought. Won't you be surprised to see me? The horse moved at a quick trot, and very soon they left St. Joseph behind. As the road followed the low, rolling hillside, Peg sucked in a deep fragrance of the warm air, lush from the damply bitter fragrance of tall grass. It's so peaceful here, she said. I love the countryside. I do too, Miss Hennessy smiled, away from the noisy, constant creaking cartwheels and the clomp of horses, and Peg startled as Miss Hennessy broke off, following her gaze to the bend of the road ahead. 6 Union soldiers, their uniforms streaked with dust, rode toward them. As the soldiers approached, a sergeant in front of the group held up a hand, and Miss Hennessy quickly pulled her horse to a stop. Peg held her breath, frightened in spite of the fact that these were Union soldiers, here to uphold the law under martial rule. She and Miss Hennessy had done nothing wrong. 3 of the soldiers were young, and seemed uninterested in either the buggy or its passengers. But one man whose beard was shaggy and dirty with crumbs from recent meals, searched the wagon with his eyes, his gaze coming to rest on Miss Hennessy's reticule, which lay on the buggy seat. Miss Hennessy's gloved hands gripped the reins tightly, but her voice had no indication of her nervousness. Instead, she smiled sweetly and said, "Good morning, Captain." "Not Captain, man. It's just Sergeant," he said gruffly, but his chest swelled with self-importance. "Where are you bound for?" "My daughter and I are going to visit my sister," Miss Hennessy told him. "Daughter?" Peg was startled. Why did Miss Hennessy lie? Miss Hennessy fumbled with her reticule and pulled out a letter promising safe passage. "General John Bassett, the Provost Marshal of St. Joseph, gave this to me." The sergeant dutifully examined the letter and then handed it back. "You live in St. Joseph?" "Yes." "And where does your sister live?" "In Buchanan County, on River Road." He quickly glanced inside the buggy. "You haven't got a lot of traveling bags with you, so I take it you don't plan to stay long?" "That's right, just today." "I'd caution you not to return after dark. There's no telling who you might run into on these back roads." From the corner of her eye, Peg shot a quick glance at the soldier with the beard, who was still looking at the reticule. Union Army or not, I hate to run to this one anywhere, Peg thought. "You may proceed," the sergeant said. Miss Hennessy smiled again, picked up the reins, and clucked at the horses. The soldiers rode past them with a great clatter, stirring up clouds of dust and causing Peg to cough. The moment they were out of hearing, Peg said, "Why'd you say I was your daughter?" "Not now." Miss Hennessy's voice was low and quick. "What do you mean, not now? Hush!" To Peg's amazement, Miss Hennessy pulled a small handgun from her reticule and tucked it on the seat under her skirt. In a low voice, she said, "Whatever may happen next, don't be afraid."